Well, good morning, everybody. Since it's early, I decided it would be good to have a panel with two people with the same first name who work for the same entity. So we could keep it simple for you guys. James Braid and James Blair are two of the, in our world, Capitol Hill, Congress, legislative affairs, two of the most important people in Washington. So I'm happy to have them here. We'll kick this off just with a question about responsibilities. Tell us about both of you, starting with the far James. I'm going to have to go the far James and the close James. What you do on a daily basis, what are you responsible for in the White House?
Sure. And when James Braid joined, I told him, you don't get your first name. I was here first. I have it first. You're just Braid now. So
Right.
on Capitol Hill, we're trying to rebrand him.
You've been dehumanized.
We're trying to rebrand him by his last name. Well, he's a football player, as you can tell, so it's just the last name. My portfolio is really the external-facing portfolio of the White House, so that involves the Legislative Affairs Office that I oversee, which James is the director of, obviously our lobbying arm on Capitol Hill. And then I also oversee the Political Affairs Department, which is the White House political operation, and the Intergovernmental Affairs Office, which deals with the interplay between the federal government and state, local, and tribal governments. And then, as I was telling Jake backstage, some miscellaneous projects here and there. But that's the main.
Do you want to talk about those miscellaneous projects?
Well, we were talking about Greenland, which has elections today, so we'll see how they go. Parliamentary elections.
That's taking over Greenland,
We wouldn't say taking over. We would say, as the president said 2 nights ago, welcoming them, if they so choose, into the family of the United States.
Very exciting.
Okay. James Braid, you are the eyes and ears of this administration on Capitol Hill. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I run a team of about 20 guys. Obviously, 3 deputies underneath me, split between House, Senate, and internal. We're sort of consistently working to make sure that we're never surprised by Capitol Hill, and also to drive the president's agenda forward with lobbying, different strategic operations, and basically just making sure that the president's message is heard clearly and consistently in every precinct of both sides of the Capitol, and everything from Senate nominations to reconciliation to government funding.
So let's talk about government funding. We are it's 9 o'clock, just after 9 o'clock. At 3 or 4 o'clock today, we are going to Congress is going to fund the government. The House is going to try to fund the government, a CR that will extend government funding until September 30th. Both of you guys, what is the president's message as he heads into this vote, which there is some skepticism about? There are some Republican stragglers who have not agreed to this government funding bill. What is the president's message to get this across the finish line?
Well, I think you saw it last night, and you've seen it consistently over the past 2 weeks. He's been tracking this very closely. He's very strongly supportive of the CR. Basically, the message is, we took over a financial situation that was a real challenge from the Biden administration. We need a little bit of time to continue to work and continue to do the things that are going to be so exciting to Republicans, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's DOGE, whether it's other fiscal tools, the border. And so in order to do that, what we've got to do is have a little bit of runway. And this CR is it is a clean product that will give us that runway in order to accomplish the things that excite and unify the Republican conference in both chambers. And that's really been the message so far.
Other James, why is it so? Well, actually, you're not James, so just regular James. Why does Trump benefit politically from not having to deal with a crisis and just to get, because if you asked me 6 weeks ago, having covered the first Trump administration, if Donald Trump would be pushing a clean CR, I would have said there's no chance. He would want immigration, he would want cuts, he would want all sorts of things. In the long arc of Washington, this is a pretty clean CR. Why does this benefit him politically?
Well, look, we're just getting started, I think, and I think building up.
Day 49.
Yes, building up some muscle memory amongst our colleagues in the House and the Senate on the Republican side, and letting them know that, look, there's going to be some things that are imperfect. They're maybe not our preference, but we have the trifecta in Washington. It doesn't come along very often. And what the president tells them very clearly is we've got to stick together. We need unity, and that's what it's going to take to get his agenda passed. So a first kind of big test of that, I think, is government funding. Obviously, probably wouldn't have preferred to have it in the middle of March, but here we are. So it's really just, it's pragmatic. We have to get it done.
Yes, I thought that was a mistake from the beginning.
Yeah, but it's okay. You know, I think we will get it done. And I think that will build the runway both on the policy side and politically, and just sort of unity within the party to take the big fights on that are obviously coming down the road this summer and fall.
I'll say to both of you, and you were on the Hill at the time, I think, during the first administration, but it is a marked difference from where Trump was last time. I mean, I think in 2017, 2018, he would have not, he wouldn't have accepted something like this. I think it's a marked difference from where he was last time, during the last administration. Do you agree with that?
Well, I didn't work in the last administration, so I am careful to compare. But I would say that, first of all, the president got a lot of these members elected, particularly in the House, or really significantly helped in their elections. I mean, he has deep personal relationships on Capitol Hill that maybe were not there 8 years ago, which changes a lot. He is very in tune with the process and how it all works. Obviously, I mean, he would say back then, he says he was new to Washington, spent 17 days in Washington in his life. I mean, he said all of that publicly, but now he spent a lot of time with these folks, and he's been thinking deeply in the years that he was out of office for what he wants to accomplish and what it takes to get there. And the president is pragmatic at the end of the day. He understands that in business and life and politics, you don't get everything you want. You got to make a deal. And I think that he is just very circumspect about that reality, particularly with the thin margins that we have.
All right, Braid, James Braid, Braid, James. We're going to get very quickly into 2026 spending, the spending for next fiscal year. The president has said that he wants the DOGE cuts, and the speaker has said he wants the DOGE cuts to be reflected, the cuts that Elon Musk has said he's found. What else do you think, project forward a little bit, what else does the next year of spending look like to you?
Well, I think we certainly have some eager partners in both the Senate and the House, which will be profoundly different from what we had. I mean, if you look at what actually happened in the Senate, there was an extreme reluctance in the previous leadership to move appropriations bills. And so when you have people working together constructively on both sides of the aisle, or not both sides of the aisle, but obviously in the Senate, but both sides of the Capitol, what you're going to end up seeing is an appropriations process that is much calmer, much saner, and much more consistently delivered over time, so that you don't come into that deadline with an all or nothing proposition where we're kind of wondering, well, is the government going to shut down in 5 days, as you alluded to in your first comment? So I do think there's a lot to get excited about if you are an appropriations nerd and you are looking forward to a process that involves a little bit more consistent activity over the period of the fiscal. And I think that's something to be optimistic about, because I think what you do have with Cole, with Collins, with Thune, and with Johnson are people who are very serious about trying to get this process on track in a way that brings Republicans together and gets us to an outcome that's a little different than the one that happened here.
Let's talk about reconciliation. The president is, his entire agenda, tax cuts, immigration, energy, boosted military spending, is on the line over the next couple of months. I want to ask, when does the president expect for it to be on his desk?
I don't think we would put a date on that. I mean, he wants it as soon as possible, but he's also, he understands the complexities with negotiating some of the provisions, particularly the tax bill. I think you will see him and us keep our foot on the gas pedal, but I don't think that today we're going to break news with a specific week it has to be done by.
Well, the speaker says he wants it done by the end of April, early May. I think that's a difficult thing to do. Will it be in one piece or two pieces at the end of the day in the final consideration?
I think the president's been clear. His preference is for one big beautiful bill. I think that's the track that we're one big beautiful bill. That's the track we're rolling down now, we're all in on delivering that one big beautiful product to him.
Let's talk about some of the things he wants on the tax side. He has listed a lot of new tax priorities. No tax on tips. To me, let me actually pause on that. No tax on tips seems to be the thing that he mentions the most. Would you guys say that's probably his top priority when on a new tax provision?
I think it is what he has been publicly campaigning on the longest. It was the first major tax cut provision he rolled out on the campaign trail. So I think at some level he thinks about them sequentially in that order. He's mentioned a number of new tax cuts, which I'm sure you'll get into.
Yes.
But of the big three, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime pay. I think we'll have to work through the process, look at the cost, and see sort of what the guardrails would be on those things. But I don't think today he's prepared to rank them. He wants significant progress on all three. He committed them. They're very popular. People understand them, and we'll push as hard as we can to get as far as we can in those cuts.
There's also James Braid, no tax on Social Security, write-offs for car loans.
American-made cars.
American-made car loans. He has mentioned first responders. He wants them to have a tax break. People living abroad. Carried interest loophole, something on sports owners. He wants some sort of limitation on their deductibility. There's a lot. It's a lot of cats and dogs, as they say on Capitol Hill, to get done.
Well, and some of those are revenue raisers, right,
Yes,
Jake? So
that's for sure.
the
Yep.
name of the game is obviously we have to figure out where the costs are and where the revenue comes from, but some of those actually make the process a little bit easier, carried interest, for instance. So in terms of revenue, obviously it's a politically complicated question as well.
Carried interest is a tough one, right? I mean, carried interest is something that John Thune and Republicans have been against for eliminating the carried interest loophole. They've been against for a long time. I mean, that's a tough one.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, the president, he would tell you almost got it done the first time, and he sort of decided to let it go, and I don't think he's as likely to let it go this time.
Is that right?
He thinks it's a loophole that should be closed.
Why does he think that?
It's just what he thinks. That's his prerogative. I mean, he's well aware.
Well, I'm not saying it's not his prerogative.
He's well aware of the impacts.
Yeah.
He's well aware of who cares about these things, and he just doesn't think it's a good policy. He's
got a lot of hedge fund guys and private equity guys who probably benefit from that on his campaign donor roll.
Can't imagine. Who knows? I doubt we'd hear from him.
That's right. And why? What is with the sports team thing?
Again, I think it's one of those areas where he looks and he just thinks that there shouldn't be, and there's certain things specifically that he's heard, but just special deductions for those types of folks. I mean, he just doesn't think that it's necessary, doesn't think it's good policy. It is a revenue raiser. And very simply, I think he would tell you there's working class guys who have been New York Giants fans in his telling, all their life, and now
I feel bad for them.
You can't. That's true. But more importantly, the reason he feels bad for him is, you can't really go to an NFL game unless you got a couple grand sitting around for the day. Meanwhile, teams have huge valuations, owners get special tax breaks, and it's good. What are we doing this for? So he just thinks it's not a good policy, and it's time to bring it to a close.
And I'm sure those sports owners will be very silent during this process and realize they should pay their quote-unquote fair share.
Again, I can't imagine we'll hear from them. Can't imagine they'll care.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about the debt limit. That's quickly approaching. May. Is it your expectation that should be in the reconciliation package?
I think if you look at what the House did, and again, you're talking about things that people are saying are impossible on the front end, but
I'm
keep
not
happening.
saying they're impossible.
Well, a lot of people said that the House wasn't going to put up, a $4 trillion debt ceiling increase, and they did, right, with an extremely narrow majority on a partisan basis. And so it does present some optimism for the partisan approach and present some possibility for the partisan approach. Also, historically, these things have gone in a bipartisan way. So try to figure out which one of those is the optimal approach. But, we do have a lot of optimism toward the partisan path, in large part because of that budget resolution outcome.
And I think pulling it out of reconciliation would probably give Democrats a huge amount of leverage on the debt ceiling if it rode alone.
I think we're looking forward to negotiation on either part, either intra-party or inter-party.
Yeah, let's talk about immigration and border security. A big priority President Trump's has been for a long time. Border crossings are way down since Trump took office, as you guys have noted once or twice, I think, in your communications from the White House. I think on the one hand, it probably makes the timeliness of reconciliation, it gives them a little bit more time. They don't need more money. You probably will need more money for beds and certain immigration enforcement measures in the coming months. I wonder if the president still has any interest in a broad-based immigration reform. He got, I don't want to say he got close, but he had conversations about that during the first administration with House and Senate Republicans and Democrats. I wonder if you think that's still possible.
I mean, I won't speculate on where the administration will go over a 4-year period, but I definitely think first and foremost and very clearly he's focused on undoing the damage of the last 4 years. There will, Tom Homan and Secretary Noem have gone to Capitol Hill and they've said, look, we're going to need more money to continue these efforts at the scale to the point that we want to. The first objective has been get out the violent criminals. Yes, some people, who have not committed other crimes besides, crossing illegally do get swept up in that as a byproduct, but that is the focus. And I think we got a good ways to go on that. So there is no reason to be talking about immigration reform when we haven't undone the damage. Yes, it is true. Crossings are down. The border is much more secure. Obviously, that's just sort of stopped the bleeding. But there's a lot of damage to undo with getting people out of the country, and particularly those that are violent criminals, of which, unfortunately, there's many. Mm-hmm. We know that. That's been proven now. And, it's a shame that it happened, and we've got a lot of work to unwind it.
Now, you're going to have 2 years with this trifecta, and...
maybe, or 4.
Or, well, at least 2. You might have 4, but at least 2. We'll talk about that in a second, but... So you're going to get reconciliation done presumably by the end of the year at the latest. Taxes go up January 1st, or a whole number of taxes go up January 1st. So you kind of want to get it done by the end of the year. What else do you think? What other issues are on the president's radar or the White House's radar legislatively over the next 2 years?
There's various things. I mean, we just had the crypto summit last week. The president wants to move the crypto industry forward. That's an example of something I could see, right? There's a couple of things out there, stable coins and market structure legislation. That seems to be where people are headed sort of over the first year or so. So we could see things like that. Another, what's going to obviously consume all the oxygen is really, taxes board or the reconciliation package. But that's an example of, some, I don't want to say lesser because they're important, but sort of lower profile things that we still think are significant, and all stuff the president campaigned on. I mean, if you want the roadmap for what the president is focused on, look what he said on the campaign trail. We keep track of that closely, wants to deliver on what he promised the American voter.
And I think there'll be a lot of opportunities for different pieces of lawmaking that, to James's point, will be maybe not as high profile, but bipartisan and potentially less controversial. So there's a lot of opportunity here, largely because we have a Congress that actually wants to act and wants to do things and wants to address some of the problems that are facing the country.
How about California wildfires? I mean, is that still on the White House's radar?
Certainly.
Has to be.
I think, it's the issue still is not fully mature. Obviously, the governor sent up a request for, I believe it was $40 billion a couple of weeks ago. OMB is going to have to work through that and figure out, what's in, what's out, and figure out what the ultimate request figure is that they would kind of work on and come up with.
I want to make a point on that, though. I mean, what the administration has done on the California wildfires really never been done before. Like, the debris removal timeline that was given was like 18 months. They got it done in 30 days after President Trump came in and got on the EPA and got on the Army Corps to get all of this moving. So he's very focused on solving the problem and cleaning up the problem. But as James said, the money piece of that probably has to mature a little bit more before we start to deal with it. But it's definitely on his mind, and we've made great progress.
Certainly.
Has the president, let's talk about Democrats for a minute. Has the president had conversations with Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries? You're thinking of a way to dodge, but I'm not going to.
It's not dodge. I mean, look, I'm not going to speak to the president's private conversations. He's obviously known Chuck Schumer a long time, and Leader Jeffries less so. But I think, in time, there will be conversations, and that's probably how I would leave it today.
Well, I'm not going to leave it there. The Democrats, listen, this is one of the big dynamics, and we chatted about this for about a second backstage, but Democrats are saying they're going to hold the line against this government funding bill today. I'm curious for your impressions or your thoughts about that.
I think the administration is open to the Democrats being constructive. I don't think we hide that. But if if they're going to focus on just sort of being the resistance in the short term, obviously that's their prerogative. But I think we welcome being constructive from across the aisle. And they got plenty of members, too, who it is in their political best interest and their policy best interest to be constructive. So we'll see how that evolves.
Let's, final question on midterms. The president, I don't know if you've recognized this, but I think he likes campaigning. It's just a hunch I have from the last couple of years. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, will be here later today, has said without any shadow of a doubt that he's going to keep the House majority and he's going to grow the majority in 2026. That would be a first, I would say, or not a first, but it would certainly be a unusual happenstance if he's able to grow the majority. There's a lot of unusual happenstances since Donald Trump got on the political scene, so I'm not going to make any predictions about what that would look like. But do you, talk about the president's involvement in 2026 and how you guys see the 2026 landscape.
On the House side, the map's pretty offensive, really. There are 13 seats that Democrats hold that President Trump won. Now, on average, he outperformed the Republican by like 5.2 points there.
Right.
So
there's a difference between a Republican running with Trump on the ballot and a Republican running without Trump on the ballot, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. And look, I think there is a coalition that swept Donald Trump into office that obviously the work for those in Congress and which we will try to help them with is bringing that sort of Trump coalition to be more of a Republican coalition in the midterms. But definitely the framework is there to be very successful in the midterms on just sort of a map basis on the House side. There's some other dynamics, and you mentioned it's not common, but there's been only 2 times in the last 100 years that a president has added seats in both chambers in the midterms.
96? 98.
No, where he's added it in both chambers is only 2002. There's been different times where they've added one or the other, but where they've added in both chambers was 2002, obviously after 9/11, and 1934 after the New Deal was passed. So only 2 times in the last 100 years. And I say, the model is a little bit 1934, where you got to do some transformative things that can change political coalition for a generation. I think we have that opportunity. I think that's what the president campaigned on. He has an evolved coalition for the party, and hopefully in Congress they can help deliver that agenda that appeals to a broader segment of voters and have historically been Republican. And I think that is frankly, the main objective in Congress, for Congress, if they want to do that in the midterms. But secondarily, look, the president is sitting on a huge pile of cash. He really enjoys raising it, and he has told everybody that he plans to use it in races, and I think that is a huge value add, not only the strength of his political brand, but the strength of his political operation, and that is very not typical for a president. When has that ever happened before? So I think we're in a fairly advantageous position, but we got to give the voters something to vote for, and that means delivering on what we campaigned on this last time.
Any thoughts? Will he campaign against Tom Massey, who has invited a primary challenge to?
Time will tell, but
we'll see.
Read the truth and draw your own conclusion.
All right, James and James, thank you very much. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it, guys.